everybody. This is your new episode of Tell Me I'm a Good Mom. And today I want to talk about, I guess, kind of the obvious being pregnant online. I'm pregnant. My baby could be born literally at any moment. This is my new podcast, obviously, and I'm so excited to be partnering with Dear Media. When I had the idea for the show, I realized out of the gate, even the name itself, Tell Me I'm a Good Mom, is controversial to a certain degree, right? And I knew that people listening or tuning in or even just seeing the social clips would have a strong reaction. And that is really what I want to talk about today in this episode as I am preparing to welcome our daughter into the world, being pregnant online. Like, why are we doing this, everybody? It seems crazy to be pregnant, to be putting the content online, but maybe it's not. So today's episode is half manifesto to a certain degree, half cultural juice. Just saying that, like, I'm pregnant on the internet feels like it does feel like it comes with a comment section. And again, like, that is kind of the point. There are already opinions baked into the phrase, the reactions, the assumptions, and really, I'm okay with all of that. And on this show, Tell Me I'm a Good Mom, we are, as episodes continue, going to be okay with all of that, right? The show is nuanced. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to reflect. I want to remind you that being pregnant online is really not new at all. Sharing has always existed, and it has always made people a little bit uncomfortable. The internet did not invent sharing. It just gave it a new address to a certain degree, if we're being totally honest, right? Before social media, women shared their pregnancies in their kitchens, in their living rooms, through phone calls, through sip and sees, right? You used to have your baby and then invite the whole neighborhood over to see your baby. And a lot of people still do that, right? Neighbors stopping by. Frankly, 200 years ago, if you were, the Queen of England or whatever, you might have to give birth in front of a room of people just to prove to them that the child you birthed was legitimate and had not been brought in a bedpan, right? So the instinct to talk about this moment, a moment this big, has always been there, right? And on this show, we're not really asking for approval to talk about this stuff. We're making room for a moment that is so big during, like, a truly monumental change in your life. I hope with that, it kind of helps to set the tone, not only of this episode, but also the show in general, right? Like, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. It's not a debate. And honestly, what I would also like to say is that it's not that serious, right? We can talk about pregnancy and motherhood and our deep feelings about it, but it's not that big a deal if we disagree, if we don't come to the same conclusions, right? Anyway, so this kind of sharing we've already determined and agreed did not begin with the internet, right? And I want to go into a little bit on my own reasons for why I'm sharing or have been sharing my pregnancy journey online to a certain degree. And I actually want to be really clear that sharing who I am and sharing my story is actually, for me, not new. If you are new to the show, if you're new to who I am, surprise, I was on TV as a kid. I was cast onto two MTV shows out of high school. The first was Laguna Beach. The year was 2004. Well, actually, it was earlier than that. We filmed my senior year of high school, 2003, 2004, but they cast us onto the show our junior year. So it was even, 2002, kind of when the whole Laguna Beach journey started. And I was on TV, from 17 through the early years of college. And then I graduated to the Hills. And that show ended in 2010 to 2012. We're going to need a little clarity on that. I think 2010. So sharing has never really been new for me. What I have to say is that when we were cast onto Laguna and the 20th, the 20-year Laguna reunion is actually going to be coming out pretty soon. And I think you're going to hear a lot from people about their experience and kind of like how they thought the show would go. We didn't really anticipate that it would become a full-blown reality show. At the time, there was a show on MTV that was called My True Life. And I don't know if this show still exists today, but we thought that the show was going to be much more like My True Life, and feature and highlight kids from Orange County, because on the CW at the time, there was a very popular show on called The OC with Misha Barton, and we just loved The OC. We were just normal kids, right? We were obsessed with pop culture, and when they came to our town, we said, yes, we want to do that. It was so exciting. They came to the high school, they set up in the quad, and they had us fill out these, big paper packets about our lives and our friends, and it was really interesting. And then we realized once the show was on TV that it was Pandora's box. The first episode premiered, and the first episode premiered actually pretty close to my 18th birthday, the very first week I was in college. I was at UC Santa Barbara at the time, and I had been living in the dorms for a couple days before the show started. And then the show started, and my life was never the same again. I went from normal college kid for those first couple days to kind of like the weirdo on campus, almost immediately, almost overnight. I was bullied. I was harassed. It was crazy. And I realized that it was uncomfortable for me, but I was going to have to figure out how to live in my new reality because, like I said, it was Pandora's box. There's no going back. And ultimately, over the years, I learned how to make peace with this new version of my life, right? This version of my life where I would always be in the public eye to a certain degree. And I think that there have been many moments where I have thought, oh, I can just disappear. But I think fans of Laguna or fans of pop culture in general have seen over 20 years that the show just doesn't really go away. It remains popular. And the people who came up on that show are still relevant, right? There are a lot of people that have incredible public-facing careers. I realize the internet has also dramatically evolved and changed since we were in high school, and it has given us this platform to continue to share, for better or for worse, kind of whether we like it or not. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that I have had an opportunity to continue my career in parts on the internet, and I've asked myself many times, or had the conversation with myself many times, that it would be silly to not take advantage of these incredible blessings, right? And these incredible gifts that have been hard fought and battle won, but that I have, right? And in a lot of ways, I have gotten super comfortable in the public eye, probably because I've been on TV since I was 17 years old, right? I've learned how to deal with negative feedback, with people's opinion of me that may or may not be accurate, right? I have my opinion of me, but you have your opinion of me, and it could be a more realistic opinion of me than I have of myself, right? And sharing my story has just become a part of who I am to a certain degree. And so when I got pregnant, there really wasn't a part of me that thought, I'm going to keep this from people. I'm going to keep this from my audience. I'm going to keep this from customers of Love Wellness who have gotten used to me sharing my health story and trust me because of what I have shared, right? That sort of was the next chapter of my public story. I went from being on Laguna and the Hills. I moved to New York City in 2012, and then I started Love Wellness. That's a decade ago now. My goodness. Time flies when you're having fun, everybody. I started Love Wellness because I was so incredibly unwell. Physically, yes, but also emotionally, spiritually. I was going through a really significant transition at the time, coming off of TV and trying to figure out what my path forward looked like. And it only really got easier for me when I was honest with my audience and my community about what I was going through. I remember I had a blog at the time, The Lowdown. It was one of the early blogs. And I wrote an article at some point before I launched Love Wellness, talking about how I had had like the hardest year of my life. And I was going through such a moment of depression and anxiety. And it was so cathartic to share my story, to communicate out what had been bubbling up and building inside of me for so many years. And it was only when I started to share again that I started to feel better and ultimately get better. And I think that that is a big part of why people share pregnancy content online also. Like, we're not sick, but pregnancy is confusing and it's isolating and it's lonely. And so when we share, we're not seeking approval per se, we're seeking community. We're looking for people to listen and to look and to say, hey, I've been there too, right? We're looking for validation in some way, but again, it's not necessarily approval. And that one blog post ultimately led me to start Love Wellness. You know, this is a company that I have really put my blood, sweat, and tears into. It's our 10-year anniversary this year, 2026. I started this company in my living room alone in this moment that I'm talking about, this moment of, deep depression and anxiety and being so unwell. And again, it was not just sharing that mental health story, but it was sharing my physical health story and journey that not only helped me really launch that business and company, but I became known for talking about in a very transparent and honest and hopefully moving towards stigma-free way of talking about women's bodies, because I was talking about vaginal health in 2016. I was talking about women's hormones in 2016, gut health, all kinds of things that really up until that point were quite taboo. And it's because I was willing to go there in those early days that I think my business launched so successfully, and ultimately why it has been able to grow over many years to where it is today. I was a solo founder operator those first 2.5, 3 years. And we were the first company to make a fragrance-free intimate cleanser. We were the first company to put boric acid suppositories into a retail store in Ulta in 2019. We were one of the very first companies to start making multi-strain vaginal probiotics. we were really on the forefront of white space innovation in the women's wellness category all the way back in 2016. So it was sharing my story, but it was also really great forward thinking innovation that was based on the reality of women's bodies, the science behind women's bodies, that pushed my business forward. And now, again, I only think it is what it is because I was willing to share this story. And so, again, as I've gotten pregnant, this desire to share and commune is kind of back. And I think it's why I wanted to do this show. Not so that my pregnancy journey is super polished, because it's not, right? A lot of the stuff that I put out there is not super thought through. I make it on a whim. It's based on what I'm feeling, but that's also sort of like the reality of, sharing anything that is really significant that is happening in your life. So for me, this show and sharing my story is really kind of adding another chapter to who I am personally and professionally. This isn't a pivot for me. It's really about continuity, I think. And for me, pregnancy really isn't just a physical event. It is one of the biggest identity shifts that a person can go through. It has changed how I feel about my body, my future, my work, my relationships, time. Everything starts to be reorganized around it. And when something changes you that deeply, the instinct to talk about it, I think, is super natural. You want to name it, witness it, you want to understand how other people have moved through it. And I also want to acknowledge the other side of that, because I have been there too. I'm 39, having a baby soon. I didn't meet my husband until I was 37. And I was single for a number of years before I met my husband. And so I know that for a lot of people, pregnancy and motherhood content can be really hard to consume. Like when I was longing for a relationship, when I was longing to be a mom, seeing pregnancy announcements and pregnant friends felt like this like quiet stab in the heart over and over and over again. I am holding a pencil. That feeling is so real. And that really deserves to be named also, and for people to make space for that. And now that I'm, again, like on the other side of that, and I do have a platform, I want to be honest about something else. It's like I'm having a conversation with the previous version of me, in not like an apology type of way, but in an explanation type of way, because now I've been on both sides and both sides are really emotional. It is almost impossible not to be consumed by what is happening, like the biological shift, the emotional shift, the way your entire sense of self reorganizes around this one fact. It is so profound. It is destabilizing. It is life-shattering in the most literal sense. And when something is that all-encompassing, it does become about you, and not in an ego way, but in an existential way. You're trying to make sense of who you are becoming. And so sharing isn't about broadcasting perfection. It's really about processing transformation in real time.
We've tried it all. Expensive lattes, 5 a.m. workouts, even juice cleanses. But feeling good shouldn't be this complicated. Introducing new Quick Melt Strips from Love Wellness, a simple new way to supplement. Formulated to deliver a concentrated dose of active ingredients, these fast-dissolving strips melt in your mouth. It's sugar-free support for energy, sleep, bloating, and more to help you feel your best anytime, anywhere. It's wellness stripped.
All right. we've chatted about like so much serious stuff this episode. The manifesto half of this episode, which could go live and I could listen to it and be like, that is so dumb. But I felt like, or I feel like, as I put together my content for the first half of this episode, the manifesto half, that the POV behind like why we share is not shared that much. And I felt like it deserved an explanation to a certain degree. But with that, I want to transition into some different kind of topics for this episode. And I want to talk about the fact that having a pregnancy or motherhood podcast is not about sharing my kid. And I want to say this part like really plainly because I do think it matters. My kid is not my content. I'm really here to talk about what it means to be a mom, physically, emotionally, professionally, in real time, like as these things are happening to me. I am not of the belief that reflection is exploitation. And I think some people will definitely disagree with me on that. But women have been talking about motherhood forever, right? What's new isn't the conversation. It's the permission to say what it actually feels like when you're in it. And so again, for me, talking about being a mom isn't really about my kid. It is an exploitation. It's like us figuring out how to make sense of this change. And so it leads me to ask, what is okay to share? And I think a lot of parents grapple with this question all the time because the internet is a fucking crazy place, everybody. I was talking to my sister-in-law about this a few weeks ago. And I said, well, like, it's okay to like share family photos sometimes. My daughter will be in them. I feel like that's normal. And she is a lawyer, so I think she takes a very conservative POV on this. And she was like, no, you can't do that. And it kind of got me thinking, like, as my husband and I prepare for the birth of our daughter, where will we draw the line? Like, what is okay and what is not okay in terms of just personal stuff that we want to share because we already all share personal stuff on the internet anyway. Like, when she's born, will I share her full name? Probably not. Will I share her birthday? Will I share her face? I don't really know yet. I get all kinds of opinions, as I said, and I see people do all kinds of different types of sharing, right? Like we all know, we see the content of the kid and there's the heart emoji over the face or the smiley face emoji over the face. And then there are some people that, only show like the back of their child on the internet. And then there's people that just go for it and they, put their kids on the internet almost diary style, like pretty regularly. And I don't really judge anybody for any of that, like any like level they take, right? It's super personal. And I'm just not quite sure where I'm personally going to land on it yet, if that makes sense. And I'm sure I will actually get a lot of DMs about this. And I think the opinions will fall all over the map, right? Like, you're in the public eye, like, you're a bad mom if you put anything about your kid on the internet. Also, you're in the public eye, like, we're a part of your story, we're so interested in your family. And like those people's intentions are actually good, you know what I mean? Versus creeps. Because I really think it's like the creep factor that everybody is worried about, right? Because again, like it's normal to share your story. It's normal to share your family with your community around you. And not a ton of people like have this real life village anymore, and the internet has sort of become their village, right? Their followers and the people they follow are sort of their village now. So it makes sense that you want to share. But it really is about the creep factor. I think it comes down to the creep factor. And I think it's hard to exist truly in a society where, again, like most people have good intentions and it feels natural to want to share, but then you have to think about all of these risks involved and all of these unknowns. And I'm somebody that doesn't want to live in fear of the unknowns, but I also don't want to take unnecessary risk. And so I guess in the coming weeks, my husband and I will decide where we personally draw the line, right? And I also want to give myself permission today to change where the line is and not necessarily have to explain why I'm doing so. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, I'm curious. I think I will get a lot of, DMs and opinions on this. And if you have it figured out, please feel free to slide into my DMs and tell me what you think I should do. Speaking of the internet, app culture for pregnancy and moms is so absolutely out of control. And I mentioned this on the birth plan episode, but when my phone figured out that I was pregnant, immediately, by the way, my entire algorithm changed instantly, and it has not gone back to what it was. I actually kind of prefer my previous algorithm. It's like a lot of like astrology and dog videos. And now it's just flooding me with mom content, parenting content, pregnancy content, birth content, all the stupid shit that I supposedly need to buy to be an effective parent or whatever all the time. And so much of it is so annoying, so exquisitely annoying. And it makes it even harder to exist in the world without the topic of motherhood kind of being on your mind constantly and really affecting like your behavior in the world. But then there's this other part of the internet that actually is nice and helpful and educational. There's this part of the internet that I have been really drawn to when it comes to fertility, pregnancy, all the stuff that we are talking about, all the stuff that I have really been talking about and sharing for years. I mean, it's why I've created this show, right? To try to be a part of that online sharing culture in a positive and nuanced and reflective type of way. And I think for me, it started with my own fertility journey back in 2020 when I decided to first freeze my eggs. And like the internet, Google is an educational tool for better or worse, right? But I went through infertility. I went through IVF. I went through long stretches of uncertainty where I didn't know how things would turn out. And I think what helped me most during that time wasn't experts telling me what to do. It wasn't like advice or plans. It was other women telling the truth. To be totally honest, to be totally honest about telling the truth. Their stories gave me language, not answers. Like language for feelings that I hadn't yet learned how to name at that time. They helped me recognize what I was experiencing instead of questioning whether something was wrong with me or not, right? Because, like, there was something wrong with me. Stories don't replace doctors or decisions. They really replace isolation. And I see that time and time again when I talk about my own fertility story, when I ask you guys, what are your questions about fertility and IVF? Because so many of us are super isolated right now. Like I said, like we don't have that village anymore because like the village, it's just not the same. And so for better or worse, the internet has become this library of lived experience, especially around fertility, pregnancy, motherhood. It's the first place that they see something that looks like their real life, and it's how we learn now. Pregnancy and motherhood are like too big to be covered in a single appointment with an expert. And so hearing other women's stories gives context and language and reassurance, and it's an honest one. And I think one of the upcoming episodes that we're going to do is an IVF episode with my fertility doctor sharing my story. But I kind of want to talk about the stories of the women on the internet who have really like held me close the past couple of months or years even. And this leads me to ask all of you listening, who do you want to be on the Good Mom Show? Whose stories have touched you, shaped you, educated you, helped you? Who do you want to get to know better outside of their TikTok or their Instagram? I would love that type of feedback from everybody as we build out the guest list for this show, because your guys' feedback is an incredibly important part of how we build Tell Me I'm a Good Mom. So I will make sure to ask on my Instagram specifically who you guys want on the show. But if you have any incredible people, thought starters that you want to send my way anyway, please do. I wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the people that really they will probably think this is creepy, but they have really become my online companions to a certain degree. My online friends, whether they know it or not, whether it's like medical advice or pregnancy or motherhood stories. So the first person that I want to call out is Kelly Girardi. She is incredible. She is an astronaut. She's amazing. She has been very publicly sharing her story about secondary infertility and super publicly about pregnancy loss, which I don't think anybody that shares online expects something really tragic and awful to happen. And it's tough when you have an audience and when they're following along on your story, because I think you feel compelled to share, especially, well, you kind of can't help. You have to share when something goes wrong if you're already sharing your journey, right? And she has so beautifully and eloquently and bravely, might I add, shared her pregnancy loss and secondary infertility story with all of us. And I learned a lot about the good side of the internet when it comes to mom culture through Kelly, because it definitely exists. And I'm I feel I feel really emotional when I talk about her story and her journey, because again, like I am a bystander. I'm an observer of this incredible woman. Um and it's so remarkable to me how much a stranger can make you feel, and how much you can root for people that you don't, even know. Anyway, if you are dealing with infertility or secondary infertility, which is a very interesting topic of its own, I would highly recommend that you check out Kelly's content. Um, she's really cool. Another person that I follow, I love her, is a labor and delivery nurse on TikTok. Her name is Bree. She's at Labor with Bree. And she has the most beautiful, calming, educational way of talking about birthing babies. And I have learned a lot from this individual, from what to expect when you're about to get a C-section, like literally what's happening in the operating room, to everything that you need and don't need in your hospital bag. So Labor with Bree, I hope you know I'm a fan. You have prepared me a lot for my upcoming labor and birth delivery experience. um, Another person I want to call out, my friend Jill, who is going through IVF and endometriosis. She's at Jill Facts. We comment on each other's posts sometimes. She and I have a similar story. I had endometriosis excision surgery at the beginning of 2025. And I think it's that surgery that allowed me to get pregnant successfully. And she's going through a very similar journey. So if you want to go cheer her on, at Jill Facts on TikTok. And then a very popular pregnant lady. She's a mom now. Olivia Culpo. My goodness, she had some hot tips about what to pack in her hospital bag. And I just love her mom content. She's real and honest and funny and interesting, and you can see yourself in her. And she was really brave about being in the public eye and sharing her story and her body and how she felt. And I just admire how she handled it all, like really as somebody in the public eye, super gracefully. And yeah, she's some hot inspo for me. So I want to wrap up this episode by reminding pregnant moms, anybody, that joy and reassurance can coexist, right? Sharing our stories, needing that reassurance doesn't mean weakness. And I want to say this clearly, right? Needing reassurance does not mean that you're unhappy. It does not mean that you're incapable. It does not mean that you don't know what you're doing. It just means that you care deeply about something that really matters to you. Because if you are living through this moment in your life, clearly it's going to matter to you. And so I want to end the show by saying that the show is not meant to be prescriptive. What we're going to talk about on the show is not how everyone has to do motherhood. It's just like how I am choosing to do motherhood, at least out of the gate, right? And if this resonates with you, I am so glad that you're here. And if it doesn't, that is okay too. I also make space for you here. If you want to listen just to think to yourself, I absolutely hate this woman, like, that's okay. I can handle that. As somebody who has been on TV since I was 17 years old, I can handle that. That is okay, right? The show is not an argument. It is an offering. I think ultimately for me too, it's not about perfect parenting. It's not about doing things right. It's not about turning kids into content. It's really about motherhood as identity, because it's an identity that you cannot escape once you become one. And the show is about how we talk about it and how we treat women when they are in it. So before we end today's episode, a couple of housekeeping items. As I start to record future episodes, I am really looking to learn from you and to build a community here. So you're going to see me ask you questions, seek out opinions and advice on Instagram and TikTok, and bring that content that I get from you back to the show. So please follow me at Bosworth if you have not yet. You can subscribe to the Tell Me I'm a Good Mom podcast wherever you're already listening, and you can watch complete episodes of my show on my YouTube, Allo Bosworth. That's it for today's episode of Tell Me I'm a Good Mom, and if someone hasn't told you already today, I will. You are a good mom.